Warning. Listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome back to another episode of Influencers Radio. You know, last week, as we're speaking here in kind of mid-November, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that just in September of 2021, more than 4.4 million people resigned. Not laid off, but quit. That's 4.4 million people quit their jobs, while during that same time, there were 10.4 million job openings. Millions of workers are quitting right now, and it's being called the Great Resignation. Employers are having a very hard time just retaining talent, much less attracting new talent. There was another research that shows that 50% of existing employees are actively looking for other jobs. Well, today my guest is Fahim Karim. He is the founder of Gear to Harvest, a management consulting firm focused on employee engagement. With 20 plus years of award-winning industry experience leading Fortune 500 companies, Fahim helps purpose-driven growing companies to retain and attract talent. He is a highly sought-after coach working with individual CEOs and managers to become the leader that their team loves to work with. Fahim, welcome to Influencers Radio.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jack, and thank you very much for the warm welcome. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm really excited to talk to you about this because it seems to be all over the news. It's all over the talk shows, and what I really like about your take on this is you leave the politics out of it, because it seems everybody wants to point blame at, who's to blame for this happening, and you seem to be the guy that's focused on solution. So with the Great Resignation that's taking place in the U.S., there's a lot of businesses that are in panic mode right now. So what's happening? Let's start with that. Just kick it off. And what do you see? What is happening out there that's creating this?
Well, like you said, Jack, it's we don't want to blame anything because we want to find the root cause of this. And with my experience with the working in the corporate America space and looking at employees working in operations for years, what I always focused on is finding the root cause. And when we look at the data, so even like when we look at the Great Resignation that's taking place right now, just preliminary survey shows that some of the main reason the employees are leaving, 40% of them are leaving because of burnout. 34% are leaving because the company is going through an organizational change. 20% because of lack of flexibility. Another 20% lack of instances of discrimination they're experiencing in their organization, and 20% contributions and ideas not being valued. And that's based on neuro leadership research. These are the very preliminary data. It's hard to really point to one particular reason because of the sheer volume of people just resigning. But what I know from my own experience is this is not something that just happened, right? It's been brewing for years, and with COVID, everything has it really has magnified, and people have really started to question, should I be putting up with what I've been putting up with in my organization? And they're not happy with how they're feeling. So they are really pursuing more deeper, meaningful work. And in some instances, they're even quitting without even having work to go to. So it shows that also 28% of employees were so discontent that they left their jobs without another job lined up. And 56% when looking for people working in the food services and hospitality sectors, they also jumped the boat. They didn't, they just quit.
And what's amazing is, all the people with the crystal balls a year and a half ago, the people were predicting that, this is going to cost jobs. Companies are going to be laying people off. It's going to, just shrink the amount of available work, but it's like the exact opposite has happened. There's more jobs, it seems like, out there than there's ever been, open jobs, and companies are scrambling. And I know when I look at job reports or the job trends, employee engagement is a term that we often hear in the news when it comes to job trends. So what exactly does that mean, and how is it measured?
Sure, Jack. So when it comes to employee engagement, what we are looking for people who are really involved and motivated about their work. And it's not like, sometimes we may think like an employee engagement. Let's say I'm at Macy's, for example, or any retail store, for example. And if I see that there's music playing and I'm at the cashier counter and the person is like bobbing their head and the register and really, helping me pay, that's not considered, to me, that's not an engaged employee. An engaged employee says, oh, how was your shopping experience? Was there something that you were looking for you couldn't find? And engaging me and seeing what my need was, and then offering me other solutions that was available in the store or in that particular business. That's an engaged worker. So what happens is when workers are not feeling like they're appreciated, they're not cared for, they have systems and solutions that are ineffective, and so those things start to add up. And on top of that, if they have communications that are broken between them and their leadership, that also adds up. And that's when people start to get disengaged. And disengaged meaning more like they're not really they have like a 1 foot outside the door, right? And the data also shows that 50% of the existing workers are actively looking for other jobs. So that's a disengaged worker. So it goes through a phase. So there is the unengaged phase, then it's disengaged, and then they quit.
Well, and so, a lot of that people will, I guess, look at it on an emotional, a feeling side of things. It's always better to have happy employees, that kind of thing. But help me out with the math, because I know it's not easy for a lot of folks to wrap their heads around how engagement translates into profitability. Can you kind of put that into concrete terms for us?
Oh, sure, absolutely. According to Gallup, their recent research data on meta-analysis shows that the top quartile of the engaged employees, like these are the highest employees that are engaged, they have 81% less absenteeism, 64% fewer accidents. And if this is a healthcare facility, they have 58% fewer patient safety incidents, and they have 41% fewer quality defects, 18% higher sales productivity, and 23% greater profitability. Right. So from a profitability perspective, it just, when you have engaged workers, they really add so much more to your company. It's just especially when, like, and I'll give an example. Let's say there's a company that has, it's a very famous company that produces high quality food. And they probably hire, let's say, 10 chefs per year. When they hire a chef, let's say the first year, each chef is able to produce 5 dishes per day. And so when that person is able to work in that company and they enjoy their work, next year, because of their training and they really had so much practice, they can look to then double that figure, right? So they then produce 10. The third year, it may become 30. So when we are able to retain those talented chefs, the business is just making 4 times more revenue at year 3. However, when that's not happening, when the company is not able to retain those workers, those numbers start to dwindle. So, for example, in this particular example, let's say each order costs $100 and 5 orders per day. That's the $500 sales per day. So if we do like 10 chefs for 1 year, that company is making $1.1 million in revenue. Second year, that same company with the same number of 10 chefs, they're making $2.2 million. And on the third year, they're making $4.4 million if they're able to retain 100%. That's 4 times. However, with just 30% of turnover, meaning the next second year, 3 of the existing chefs left. Now they had to hire 3 more, and only the 7 of them are from the previous year. then they have lost 1.32 million in revenue. And if they have a 50% turnover, meaning 5 people left, $2.2 million loss in revenue in 3 years. And then if they have a 100% turnover rate, then that's a $4.4 million loss in revenue in 4 years.
Yeah, so I think that's a lot of people. When they look at this, a lot of people think about what's the return on retaining employees, but I think when they look at it, what's the cost of not retaining employees? Exactly. It cuts a little deeper, I think, to a lot of companies, and it seems the old school thought of what are these people complaining about? They should be lucky they have a job, right? That just doesn't fly anymore, because, like you said, people are leaving during this time, even when they don't have something else lined up, because they're just coming to the realization that I don't need to do this. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, Jack. And COVID, I would say, like, year 2020 was an opportunity for us to have a 2020 vision of what's important in life. And year 2021 is the execution of that vision. So a lot of people, they really start to question, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is this on purpose, right? And then some people have, their loved ones who they have seen passed away in front of them. Some, they're really struggling to take care of them. So when companies are not taking those into consideration and they are experiencing high stress levels at their work and they're not being appreciated, those things are showing up. And what companies don't realize is not just the loss of revenue when you lose an employee. On top of that, there's the cost of hiring, right? So you have to now hire more recruiters to get more new employees. Then there's the cost of onboarding the existing employees. You got to train the new ones. And then there's a cost of having those empty desks for those days or months that there is no employees. On top of that, there's also the revenue that you have to produce to pay for these additional expenses. That's now taking down your actual revenue more because of this additional expenses. Then there's the hidden costs of the employer's brand and advocacy, where 70% of employees use referral for current employees as to find opportunities in new places. Meaning that by these employees leaving, you're also impacting your brand, because those employees are now going and telling other places whether to go and work there or not. Versus if they had a great experience, they will be telling their friends, look, this is a great place to work. And you're now building on talent. You're bringing more talented people, right? So that's another thing. And then there's a cost of turnover on your current revenue. For example, let's say when they were making 1.32 million over 3 years, that revenue has to be like doubled. Like, for example, one data shows the cost of replacing an employee is almost half or 1.5 times more the salary of the person that got laid off for 1 year. That's how much it can cost. And then finally is that, how about lawsuits that also happen from disgruntled employees, right? When they leave or when they really what they've seen, then they go ahead and express their those things to authorities and things like that, and that also costs the company. And finally, the culture that is impacted, because, like, for example, when you lose an employee, how we're treating that employee when they're exiting also sends out different feelings to the other employees. For example, let's say you have an employee who worked really hard when they were with the company for 5, 6, or 2 years. And at the time when they're exited, when they're leaving, imagine if the boss now treats them like, oh, we never needed this person anyway, or treats that person really like, they contributed nothing. While the other team members may be quiet, but they're registering, oh, you're going to think of me like the same way. So all those things I was doing for you, you didn't really care. I'm just a number, right? And then that's how others now become disengaged. And then they're also now going to look for other works.
It's amazing. It's almost like, you think of you need to think of your employees the way that so many businesses thought of as customers, before, because it sounds like a lot of the same principles apply in the way that that now people do share their employment experience, and people go and do look at reviews of employers, like customers would go and look for reviews of businesses. It really is remarkable. You said something earlier that was interesting when you talked about finding the root cause, and when you said that, it made me think of the medical field, right? Because there's people that the easy thing is to treat symptoms, right? And then, but that doesn't necessarily get rid of the root problem. What do you see as being some of those mistakes or the misconceptions that employers have, that maybe they're focusing on treating symptoms rather than root cause of why their employees are leaving?
I really love that analogy, Jack. It really hits home for me. So I always like to give this example of type 2 diabetes, which is a chronic disease. First, let me just explain to your listeners, not that I'm a medical expert, but I do have an MBA in healthcare management. And so what happens, there's two types of disease. There's chronic disease and there is acute disease. Acute disease is something like, before COVID, we would like a common cold and we go to a doctor, they give you some antibiotic and it goes away. And which is actually, pretty solvable very easily. However, chronic disease is not like that. Chronic disease is something that shows up and it's like long term. However, in the medical profession, a lot of times they approach chronic disease with the same type of treatment like they approach acute disease, right? And research shows that, for example, type 2 diabetes, which is a chronic disease, although we call it a disease, but doctors who are really expert at it, like doctors like Ranjan Chatterjee, who has like one of the most famous podcasts in health in Europe, and he's based in UK, and he has his own show called Doctor in the House. He actually works with patients who have had type 2 diabetes, and he doesn't call that a disease. He calls them actually a symptom, because what he identified is that type 2 diabetes shows up when there are multiple factors that have already taken place in our system. So, for example, he looks at the sleep, physical activity, gut health, infections, environmental toxins, sunlight, diet. These are a few things. Once he works with those patients for a period of 3 to 6 weeks, and the patient actually implements those things, in a lot of cases, type 2 diabetes is gone, right? So I look at employee engagement in a similar way. Because, the numbers, Jack, like you said, it's very high. Like in Gallup's research for employee engagement, the highest U.S. employee engagement we have had was in May 2020, and it was at 38%. So that means 60% of our U.S. employees are disengaged, and worldwide that number is even bigger. So although it may look like it's some sort of a chronic disease that happens in every organization, but actually it's a symptom. And to me, it's not just happens because of one thing. So when I work with companies as their management consultant, looking at what is causing it, I look at different factors. I look at things like what kind of external factors are impacting them, what type of change is taking place within the organization, what are the processes like that's actually causing people headaches, what are their systems and productivity tools, what kind of bureaucracy and organizational structure, incentives, culture, leadership and communication, training and development. These are just a few. So when I look at all of those aspects, then only I can try to actually figure out what's going on. Because, sometimes we like to have like a quick solution, right,
Yeah.
Jack? Like when we have a headache, I'll just take a Tylenol and I'll be fine. Well, Tylenol doesn't really address what's causing the pain. What it does is it just suppresses it, numbs it. And so we feel like, oh, I must be feeling better. Well, in some instances, maybe the body was able to heal itself. But when it comes to chronic diseases, when somebody takes these painkillers for a long period of time, like like I remember somebody you had in your show was was so inspired by this, that one of his relative, I think his grandmother, she passed away because of her stomach burst because of a long period of taking these painkillers, right? It just destroys the stomach, and so he actually made it a mission to help people to find cure that is long lasting to address this chronic disease. So same thing with employee engagement. If we just address, like, just do an employee survey or just take employees out for a quick event outside or food, yes, those are great. But when that same employee comes back to the work, if we're dumping on them the same kind of environment, the same kind of systems, the same kind of change that is taking place that's way too much beyond their capacity, that's really too much to ask from them to all of a sudden become engaged.
And and just like you said, that more it does seem like the treating the symptoms. You hear about people doing things to pacify people temporarily. Like doing the take them out for a team building or something like that. But everything that you talked about, and as I've looked at this and listened to the things that you're talking about and watching several of your videos, it kind of becomes clear that when you follow the thread on just about any of this, it seems to take you to the leadership. Right, it seems to that the leadership is kind of where a lot of these problems or a lot of these symptoms, when you follow that, it leads to the leadership. So let's talk about that. Is it a mindset, or are people taking cues from the past of the boss subordinate relationship? So if we're really digging deep into that, what do you see as being that pivotal point where some of this breakdown is happening?
Very good question, Jack. According to Gallup, they mentioned that based on their research, 70% of the employee disengagement happens because of the managers, like the leadership. And when we look at that, there are different things that can impact. So, for example, I like this example it's a true story of the U.S. Marines. So when they were training, right, so they took 3 teams, SEAL training. So they put them on 3 different boats and they're given a competition, right, who can make it to the final fastest. So there were 3 leaders, and one of them became the first, the other one in the second and the third. So what was unique about that, the leader who was the first, his team, was very happy and they were successful. And the one who became third, or the last, he was just blaming his team, right? So what the SEAL captain did, he said, okay, let me just take the guy who was the captain of the first team, and he made him the captain of the losing team, and took the captain of the losing team and put him with the team that was the winner. Guess what happened? The losing team won. And so a lot of time it has to do with the leadership, right? So what happens is sometimes, Jack, there's this, one of the things I studied in Cornell is called the tyranny of success. So what has made me successful all these years is not necessarily going to make me successful the next coming years. I may have been successful in bringing the company to where it is now, but to take it to the next level, I need to invest in my learning. I need to invest in being more open and learning what is really needed to take my team to the next level, and being open to learning from the team as well. But if I don't invest in myself, if I don't want to be humble enough to let my team really speak and listen to them, that's when challenges show up. So things like, for example, misalignments of what the company direction is and where the projects are. So for example, let's say if I'm not clear as to what I want my company to be doing next year, then my teams are also not going to be sure as to what to invest in. Like they'll be doing all kinds of projects which may be misaligned. So budgets would be off, and then there would be, because of poor communication, if I don't clearly say what I mean. Like a lot of times we say something, but we mean something else, right? So those things also impact. And then sometimes as leaders, we think that we know we have the best solution. However, the team they tend to have a lot more insight because they're in the trenches, right? And so if we're not open to that, we're not genuinely asked them, like as a product manager, when I used to work in creating $1 million plus apps, one of the things I had to learn really fast is not to say how to do it, but to explain what exactly we're trying to do, right? Because as leaders, we sometimes tend to think, I have the solution. But that actually is not the way to approach it. But to let the team know, look, this is what we're trying to do. What do you think is the actual approach? So those are some of the things that I see at the leadership level, making those slight changes. And I look at it as it's not the end, right? Everything can be changed very quickly by being open to learning these things. And that's what I've seen. The clients I've worked with, a lot of them, they're not very empathetic. And then when I mention to them that how to have compassion when you're working with a team, and I train them and I coach them, they see the big difference. And then they're moving up. They're getting much more higher opportunities. They're moving much more. Projects are done much more effectively, and they're seeing those returns come in when they take that slight changes in the leadership approach.
And, so this is a perfect, I guess, segue into that. So we kind of been talking about the problem, defining the problem. So it's perfect. I wanted to kind of pivot into talking about the solutions with this. And you just mentioned something that could be subtle enough, but I can see where it could have a big difference with the way employees and leaders interact. So when it comes to leadership, you talked about, it sounded like leaders that start with the laying out the results that they would like to their team, rather than the process of here's how I want you to do this, without getting into the outcome that they're looking for. Is that what you were talking about? It sounds like that may be a good place to start. Can you go a little deeper into that?
Yes, absolutely, Jack. So that is correct. So basically what happens is when the leader is open to the team defining the solution, then you get really traction into getting it done. So for example, let's say the company wants to change location. They want to move from, let's say, location A to location B, and that's what the leader wants. So then the leader, rather than saying, guys, this is how we're going to do it, in 3 months time, we're moving there, and that's it. There is no buts, and we're just going to have to. But then rather than giving them the deadline, okay, we have 3 months to do, what are your suggestions? What are the things I need to take into consideration? What are the things we need to put in place to make this transition easy? Then let the team speak up. They might say, you know what, these are certain things we have to take into consideration, and 3 months may not be realistic. These are the things that may seriously go wrong if you try to do it, within that time frame. We have other contracts with these, vendors and who are supplying to this location, and all of these other considerations that the leader might have not realized, right? So by being open to let the team come up with the solution, and then just letting the team know, like, this is where I want to head. What are your thoughts? Let me know. And then you co-create that solution. By co-creating that solution, then the team is going to feel like we have a voice, and the goals that he's going to give me or she's going to give me is going to be realistic, because then I can truly make those deadlines because I had a say in that. So
it sounds like leaders can actually make it easier on themselves by taking this feedback, not have to shoulder the burden themselves. Exactly. And I guess the employees feel a much more participation in the outcome.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I could definitely see, and I think that's where a lot of, I think that's the part of leadership that a lot of people don't think about. It's that intangible part. It's you're not getting into, what needs to be done, but maybe into the whys and the hows that, can really change an employee's perspective on how they feel about their workplace. So let's talk a little bit about that. So let's say someone engages engages you. They say, Fahim, we'd like you to come in, or, we'd like to work with Gear to Harvest to do this. What does that look like? What's the process that goes into it? Because I'm would imagine that a lot of leaders may sometimes feel a little defensive or unsure of what they're about to get into. So maybe you can you go back to some medical analogies and maybe a little inoculation here, or
Sure.
set the expectations of what happens.
Absolutely, Jack. So when a leader is facing these challenges, the two scenarios I usually can see happening is the leader is willing to make the changes himself or herself, being the primary vehicle of doing it, rather than bringing me in because the company may not be ready to have an expert come in from outside and kind of helping them. So the leader then gets the input from me and then is able to implement those him or herself within the organization. But the other instance is where the company feels they are ready, and also it aligns with our company goals. If we feel that we can truly add value, that's when we are really in, and we help that company in first doing the diagnosis. So it starts with a free consultation call with me that anybody can book, and regardless whether they're looking to work with us or not, I always offer my expertise because this is something so truly needed right now. And with my years of expertise of 20 plus years working with billion-dollar businesses and really complex systems, like some of the systems I used to work with, there were like 14 different subsystems in the back office that one system is speaking to. On top of that, I'll be working with people across geography because I was working for a global company where companies offices were everywhere. And I lived in 4 different continents. So when I bring these expertise and I speak to a person who's really facing challenges, I'm able to give them an insight that they're able to implement right away. And if they're interested and if we align, then I can help them also professionally in going into either one-to-one coaching or going into doing as a management consulting for their firm. So it starts with a conversation. And in that conversation, we do a deep dive, try to find out exactly where is the problem. Because sometimes the leader may think they know the problem, but because of my honed in expertise, just like I was telling you with type 2 diabetes, I do analysis of all these areas. So I'll be looking at like, what's their change like? So for example, let's say the company has 17 projects going on this year. Out of those 17 projects, first thing is, which one of those projects is really aligned with what's most important this year? It may be only 3 of them. The others are nice to have. And at the same time, that company may only have 5 managers. They may not even be project managers, and they're already doing the work of 3 other managers that already left. So now you have 5 people doing the work of 8, and you have 17 projects, which really is more than that's needed. Right. So those slight changes, it just gives people so much relief knowing that, okay, we don't really need to do 17. Can we narrow it down to 5? And then what does that, and what are the resources needed? So I do a deep dive analysis. That's just looking at change. And then I look at processes, go through a whole set of things with them that I'm happy to do with anybody that is going through a challenge during this time, and then try to give them at least 2 solutions they can apply right away.
And a few things that you pointed out there is, I could imagine there's a whole spectrum of subtleties, and the nuances of this. I guess the easy ones are employees just say, I really don't like my boss. Right. And that's easy enough. But it sounds like there's also things where there's problems going on with companies where maybe the leader doesn't even realize there's an adversarial relationship. Right. It's stuff that people kind of, keep under their skin until, it just blows where they've had enough, and it hasn't really come to the surface. Is that what you do? Is that you kind of go below that surface to say, hey, I know it's not obvious, but here's where you're really having a problem?
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. So one client I worked with, they were facing a team that was very demoralized, and so I was brought in as an expert to see what's going on. So when I spoke to the management team of that particular division, and looked, the leadership was great, communication was great, the manager was amazing, but what happened in that particular case was process. And what happened in process is that actually in this case was systems. So just months ago, they went through a major system conversion, and the new system was causing them havoc. And whoever did the project did it so poorly, they did not train the team as to what to expect. And now the team is stuck with the system. They don't know what's happening. 50% of their transactions were not completing, failing. So this poor team was just living through each day like the work piling up and piling up and piling up, and they're not seeing an end to it. So when I got involved, I looked at it holistically, and I found out is in this particular case, this particular division, the challenge was the process. So we found a tactical solution. The team was much happier, and then we had a strategic solution to solve it, and the 50% of those errors went away. So it's not just managers. Sometimes it's the system. Sometimes it's the process. So, for example, another particular person I was speaking to, they're subcontractors, right? So they work in the construction business. So in that particular instance, it wasn't the company that was causing the employees to get disengaged. In this case, it was the client. Well, how is that? Well, because the clients that they work with have very little respect for subcontractors. They just think these are people, they're just here to take my money. And sometimes they mistreat them. And because some of the employees are not trained on how to deal with this emotionally, or how to have those meaningful conversation, it causes them also turnover. Right. However, by just going through that particular process of me looking at all those things, then I can identify. So in this case, it was external vendors that was causing the employee disengagement. By addressing that problem can be easily resolved.
You really do have a talent gift for explaining this, and I guess the fact that it's not necessarily that you have to come into a company that is already at war, between leaders and the employees, but just the fact that you can come in and kind of reveal where some of these problems are is really remarkable to me. I guess what I'd like to do, I'm trying to get my head around some of this when it comes to leadership. How many tough conversations had to be had with the leaders? Because I know that you work directly with leaders, you coach leaders on this. Do they already realize that they may have a problem, or is it something that they have to face? And is that kind of tough pill to swallow, that this may be the problem, or is it easy, once you kind of lay it out for them to see where that issue is?
I've had mixed. So for some of my clients, first of all, Jack, thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate it. With leaders, it varies. So some leaders, they're as I described different things, then they realize where they're making the mistake. They're like, oh, you know what? That is something I'm missing out. And it helps to have somebody who's external, because sometimes, it's like how do I say it, in a marriage relationship, sometimes as a husband, I may say something to my wife and it may not go to her, whereas somebody else says the same information, it may be very, she may be more receptive to that. And that's not the case between me and my wife, but I'm just using that as a hypothetical scenario. So what happens is, in an organization, sometimes communication between the leader and the subordinates, it may not be effective because they have already preconceived notions about each other. However, when you or when you work with a third party like me coming in and working with them, whether as one to many through other organization or one-to-one, it helps them to see that perspective from a neutral party perspective. And me being the voice between the two, it really helps the leader to also feel more at ease, because the team may not be comfortable giving that feedback to the leader, or they may not be also, how do I say it? They may be too emotionally attached to say it in a nice way. Like, so I'll give an example of a king who had a dream. He had a dream that he lost all of his teeth. So he had a dream interpreter, and he said, interpret my dream. So the dream interpreter, he said, sir, your honor, this is a very bad dream. He said, what does that mean? He said, this means that, all of your family member are going to be dead before you die. Right? He said, what a terrible dream. What a terrible dream. He fired the dream interpreter. He lost his job. He's gone. He said, find me somebody else. So he obviously they find another person, and he found out what happened to the first guy. He said, now tell me my dream. What does it mean? He said, sir, I have some great news for you. So what is that? He said, you're going to live so long, you're going to outlive all of your family. And so sometimes, for both sides, leaders as well as team members, we need to communicate with compassion, right? And it's not, and sometimes it's hard to do when there's too much emotion attached. So by having that intermediary party coming in and being the bridge, being compassionate to both sides, because sometimes we have to have compassion for the leader. He or she is going through tremendous amount of pressure. The entire organization is on their shoulder, and they really are in need of help. And sometimes it's very lonely up there, and they don't really know who to trust, because the people that they've trusted might have disappointed them, or sometimes they are carrying, how do I say it? Like, Jack, sometimes we project our own thoughts upon a person before the person speaks. Like, one of the principles I love is that we judge the speech before judging the speaker, right? However, that's not necessarily what we do a lot of times. Like, for example, let's say we have had in a previous corporation, maybe as a leader, when I've had some really bad experience with some of the staff not being honest with me, now that I've joined a new organization, if I still look at the new team with the same old lenses, then I'm doing them wrong, right? Those team members may be really telling me the truth, and I'm like, you know what, I don't believe that. And so then what happens is, even though I may not say it, it shows up in my body language, it shows up in the meeting, people can read that. And so then that negativity becomes manifested that I started with. Like, there's a story of, I think it's a Greek mythology, where this king, when his son was born, he went to another, I don't know what they call him, but like an advisor. And obviously he was a bad advisor in this story. So he said, this son of yours, he's going to grow up to kill you. And it was such a bad advice. So what the king did is he believed that person, and he mistreated that son all throughout his life. So then the son ended up killing him, his dad. But did he kill him because he was meant to? No, because he was mistreated. So sometimes when we as leaders are not aware of that look, I have some biases. I have some things that I'm carrying in my subconscious mind, which is negatively impacting my team. I need to be aware of that. So I give the example of like this CEO of an auto company. When he was appointed as a new CEO, he noticed that every time he asked his team to tell him what's going on, it was always good news. And he knew that's a problem. Because you cannot have an organization that's always good. There's going to be some problems. So what he realized is that the previous CEO was a person who didn't like any bad news, right? So every time somebody would give a bad news, they probably won't see that person in the next few months. So the team, all of them registered, okay, this guy, we can't give him any bad news, so we just give him good news. And the organization problem kept growing and growing. So this CEO, he did differently. So he kept asking them until one person did give him the bad news, like there is some problem in my division. He stood up and he thanked him. He said, I really appreciate you being honest and sharing that with me. Now tell us, how can we support you? Right? And so when his team saw that, within the next 2 or 3 meetings, others started to voice the problems they were facing. And then the whole company transformed, right? So those things are culture. So that when you're coming in as a leader, maybe you're entering a toxic culture that was already created by previous leadership, and those cultures are permeating. And as a leader, you have to kind of gauge and then help the team feel safe again. Let them know, like, look, things are different. I'm here to support you. It's okay to vocalize if you have made a mistake. Like, how we support someone when they become vulnerable, that really defines us as leader. Because people, like, there is this saying that in the past, our leadership was measured based on how strong we are, because it was an industrial revolution. How strong you are as a labor defined your success. Right now, our success as leaders depending on how smart and intelligent we are. But the future is based on the heart. How are you connecting with the people? And that's what we're seeing right now. And that's one of the things leaders who have not realized it are struggling with. Like, why do I have to be nice to you? I pay you, just do it. No, it just doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's so refreshing. You have such a wonderful ability to separate the problem from the person, and your analogies, metaphors are really paint such a wonderful picture. It made me think of one, when you're talking about that, how people could feel probably attacked, leaders, when you're looking at them as the problem. And I think there's all the great coaches in football, rugby, they say it best when they say, tackle the ball, not the man.
Right. Yes, exactly. If you look at epigenetics in the medical field, epigenetics is such a beautiful discovery that, sometimes in the past we were blaming our genes for everything, for our future, right? Epigenetics shows us that our future is not determined by our gene. If we make changes in our diet, our habit, our activities, we can change that genes, that bad genes that we may have. Right. So same thing for corporations, whether it's the leader or the employees. Everybody, we are all imperfect. Not a single one of us are perfect. But if we're open to it and we take the correct approach to finding the root cause and we make those slight changes, things can change really fast.
In this day and age, with what's going on with the Great Resignation and people leaving, the real cost isn't in engaging someone like you. The real cost is neglecting or ignoring the problem and not engaging someone like you. So I have to ask, what is it that led you to do this? What was your path to helping the people you help and being so passionate around this issue?
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate those kind words. And it actually starts with a story of a retired school teacher. This particular school teacher is a fifth grade teacher who retired and is living in a remote place. So he finds out one of his students has reached a very high level. And his student has become the CEO of a teaching medical hospital. So he decides to go and visit because, as teachers, for teachers, the main motivation is not monetary, but the real motivation for good teachers is when they see the fruit of their labor, which is that their students really achieving high achievements in life. So when this particular teacher found out that his student had reached a very high level, became the CEO of this medical college, he wanted to go and visit him. So he went to the office and he entered and he saw the secretary and he says, I'm so-and-so. I'm here to see the CEO of your organization and tell him I'm his teacher. He says, sir, he's in the middle of a meeting right now and I will let him know, but I'm not sure if he'll be able to come and see you. He said, okay, please have a seat. So then he goes and he tells the CEO, sir, this is so-and-so who's here to see you. And he says his name is so-and-so. And he says he taught you at such a grade and he just came to see you. Surprisingly, this CEO, he stops the entire meeting. He says, you know what, I really need to step away and please continue the meeting. And then he goes out and he greets him. And he realizes this is his own teacher. Because based on the description, he realizes this is his teacher from fifth grade. And he said, "Sir, I'm so happy you came to see me. You must please come with me and meet my colleagues." He said, "No. I just came here to see you, and and I just wanted to wish you the best, and I wanted to see you myself. I'm so proud of you." He said, "Sir, I'm so happy you came, but please, you must come with me." So he takes him to the big room. There's like 30 or 40 people sitting there, all of his staff meeting. And he takes his chair. He says, "Sir, this is my seat, and I want you to sit there." And his teacher is like, "No, this is your seat." He said, "No, sir, I would not be here today if it wasn't for you." And then he tells all of his staff that, "Sir, this is my teacher. And today I'm here because of his contribution." And when he said that, all of his staff stood up and they all started to come and shake hands with his teacher, and tears just started to flow down the teacher's eyes. That CEO was my dad. And those are the values that he raised us with, which is how you treat people who offer you no benefit defines your character. And that's something that I found very profound. Although those are things sometimes we all struggle with, but those are the values that my dad tried to impart. On top of that, I lived in 4 different continents. And by living in those places, I've had experienced the beauty and the similarity of different cultures. At the same time, I also experienced how sometimes in different cultures, because you being different, you can face racism and marginalization. So when I was growing up, those things were hard because my dad, he used to travel a lot because he was teaching in different countries. So being young, I always found it very difficult at that point. But as I grew up and I started to work, when I started to work, I realized those things were such a blessing because it made it easy for me to relate to people from different cultures. And then when I connected with my faith, I realized all of those journeys that I went through, some of them were bitter. It was a blessing. Like my cousin, she said it sometime that, Fahim, God sometimes sends us a gift in a packaging we don't like, but it's still a gift. So by me having those experiences and then having my dad as a role model for me and bringing those things together, I was able to add tremendous value to all the teams I work with. Because whenever I worked with a team, I went above and beyond to make sure every team member just felt very relaxed with me and that they could connect with me. And when I saw that, how that, made people feel at ease, we were able to solve so many big problems together, so many complex problems. And what I always learned by, traveling in different places, because even at work, I worked across different locations and worked with people across the globe, is building those meaningful relationships, right, Jack? Because we're here today, we're gone tomorrow. And what really matters is the contributions. I like the story of this one person. He was a famous person. He went back to his school and he wanted to visit his principal. And when he went back, the guard said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm so-and-so." He's like, "We got so many so-and-so here. Who are you?" He said, "I'm a gold medalist." He said, "We got many gold medalists here. Do you have an appointment with the principal?" He said, "No, I don't have an appointment with the principal." He said, "Well, then you can just see the vice principal." Okay, fine. So he goes in, he said, "Forget the vice principal. I'm just going to go and see the teachers. I'm sure they remember me." So when he's going to the teacher's waiting room, he sees one of the teachers coming out and walking towards him. He said, "I'm sure she remembers me." So he approaches her. He says, "Teacher, do you remember me?" She said, "Of course I remember you." And then he said the next few words that she said, it changed my whole perspective on life. He said, "Of course I remember you. You are the one who locked us up in our rooms." So he said, I realized at that moment, people are not going to remember me for my achievement, but they're going to remember me for the contributions I made. So those things is what influences me, Jack, because it doesn't matter what I achieve. What matters is what impact did we add to other people's life. So my goal of creating this company, having this experience of managing billions of dollars of businesses, working in very high risk, businesses, and bringing that expertise to make a difference to one employee, that perhaps one less employee would have to shed a tear sitting at their desk.
That just fascinating. I mean, your ability to convey these ideas through these stories is just tremendous. And I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing this information, because it's a huge problem that so many businesses, large and small, are facing. And it's just, it sounds like it's going to require a different way of looking at things. And it really is a huge shift. And I think a lot of businesses are fortunate that someone's out like you is there to be able to identify and isolate these problems and then provide a solution for them. If someone is, says, oh, you know what, this is exactly what I'm facing. What can they do to find out more about Fahim Karim and to find out more about Gear to Harvest and how they can get involved?
Sure. The best way to contact me, Jack, is through LinkedIn. So in LinkedIn, if they search up by my name, Fahim, Fahim Karim, and I will come up there in LinkedIn. Also, if they look up by my website, which is Gear to Harvest, that's GEAR, and then the number 2, and then harvest, HARVEST.com / then they can search by LinkedIn there, or they can also put /YouTube or /Facebook, and all of those social media channels, they should be able to access it. But I'm mostly active in LinkedIn. I encourage any listeners to connect with me there. And every week I try to add value by sharing some of the best practices that leaders can apply right away with their team and see what a difference it makes. And they can send me a message through there, and I'm happy to offer them my attentive listening to the solution problems that they're facing, and at least 2 solutions they can try and implement right away. Especially in these times, it's really hard for organizational leaders. I understand that, and so I'm happy to do that, Jack.
Well, fantastic. Again, thank you for coming on and sharing this. I think you're making a big difference in not just the businesses' lives that you're working with, but the employees, their families. It just spreads so far. So thank you.
Thank you, Jack. It's been a pleasure to be on your show, as I'm a regular listener of your show, and I admire what you do for us each day. As entrepreneurs is a difficult journey, but you make it so much more easier for us by bringing to your audience so many different beneficial tools that we learn from all of the different amazing other experts that you bring into your show. And your own life journey has been such a great, amazing journey for us to benefit from. How you also first started your career as an entrepreneur. You went through a difficult path and then used that experience to now bring us where we are today. So I really appreciate what you do every day and every week to add value to so many of us that listen to your show.
Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate it, and it's my treat, my privilege to have folks like you on the show.
Thank you so much, Jack.
So, folks, definitely check out Fahim. Again, best way to connect with him is on LinkedIn. If you look for Fahim Karim, that's Fahim Karim, or you check him out at gear2harvest.com. That's GEAR, the number 2, HARVEST.com. And we'll have the links on the show post for how to connect with them and how to check him out on the different his different channels. Until next time on Influencers Radio, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today.